The morning started like any other Tuesday in the industrial district of New Haven. Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands with an old rag and looked out the garage window at the gray sky. Dark clouds had been gathering since dawn, and the weather reports warned of chemical precipitation from the nearby factory incident. The Meridian chemical plant had leaked toxic compounds into the atmosphere 3 days ago, and now the poisonous clouds were finally reaching their neighborhood. Marcus had been running Chen's auto repair for 15 years, ever since his father passed away and left him the small garage on the edge of town. At 38, he had steady hands, a sharp mind for mechanical problems, and a reputation for fixing things that other mechanics gave up on. His garage sat between the old residential area and the newer industrial zone, making it a perfect stopping point for workers who needed quick repairs on their way to the factories. The first drops of rain began to fall around 10 in the morning. Marcus quickly pulled down the metal shutters halfway, leaving enough space for ventilation while keeping most of the toxic precipitation out. He had learned about chemical safety during his military service as a helicopter mechanic, and he knew that this rain could burn skin and damage anything it touched for too long. Inside the garage, Marcus continued working on Mrs. Patterson's sedan. The elderly woman had brought in her car yesterday with a strange rattling sound in the engine. After taking apart half the motor, Marcus discovered that a family of mice had built a nest near the air filter and chewed through several important wires. It was the kind of unusual problem that made his job interesting, even after all these years. As he reconnected the damaged wiring, Marcus heard something unusual outside. Between the steady patter of rain on the metal roof, there was a different sound. It was high-pitched and desperate, almost like crying. At first, he thought it might be a cat caught in the rain, but the sound was too deep and resonant to come from any ordinary animal. Marcus set down his tools and listened more carefully. The crying sound came again, definitely from somewhere near the garage. Despite the danger of the toxic rain, his curiosity got the better of him. He grabbed an old raincoat and a flashlight from his workbench and stepped outside. The rain immediately began to sting his exposed skin, even through the protective coating. Marcus pulled the hood up and looked around the area behind his garage. The crying sound was louder now, coming from the direction of the old drainage ditch that ran along the property line. He followed the sound, stepping carefully on the slippery ground. What he found defied everything he thought he knew about the world. Huddled against the concrete wall of the drainage ditch was a creature no bigger than a large dog, but unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. It had scales that shimmered between green and blue, even in the dim light of the storm. Four legs ended in clawed feet, and a long tail curled around its body. Most striking of all were the delicate wings folded against its back and the intelligent eyes that looked up at Marcus with unmistakable desperation. It was a dragon. A real, living dragon, and it was just a baby. The hatchling's scales were already showing signs of damage from the toxic rain. Patches of dull gray appeared where the chemicals had burned through the natural protection, and the creature was shivering violently. When it saw Marcus, it lifted its head and made a sound that was unmistakably a plea for help. Marcus stood frozen for a moment, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Dragons were supposed to be myths, stories from old books and movies. Yet here was living proof that the world contained mysteries he had never imagined. The creature's eyes held an intelligence that reminded him of his old military working dogs, animals that could communicate complex needs without words. The toxic rain continued to fall, and Marcus realized that both he and the dragon were in immediate danger. Whatever this creature was, it was clearly suffering and needed help. His military training kicked in, pushing aside his amazement and focusing on the immediate problem. First priority was getting them both to safety. "Easy there, little one," Marcus said softly, approaching slowly with his hands visible. The dragon watched him carefully but didn't try to move away. Up close, Marcus could see that the creature was exhausted and weak. Its breathing was labored, and several patches of scales had been completely burned away by the chemical rain. Marcus quickly shrugged off his raincoat and gently wrapped it around the dragon. The creature allowed him to pick it up, too weak to resist even if it had wanted to. It weighed about as much as a medium-sized dog, and Marcus could feel its heart beating rapidly against his chest as he carried it toward the garage. Once inside, Marcus set the dragon down on a pile of clean shop rags in the corner farthest from the chemicals and solvents. The creature immediately curled into a tight ball, still shivering. Its breathing was shallow and rapid, signs that Marcus recognized from treating injured animals during his military service. Marcus turned on every light in the garage and took a closer look at his unexpected visitor. The dragon was definitely young, probably equivalent to a puppy or kitten in human terms. Its scales, where they weren't damaged, had an iridescent quality that caught the light beautifully. The wings were translucent and delicate, like a bat's wings but more elegant. Most concerning were the chemical burns scattered across its body, particularly on the head and back where the rain had hit directly. The first step was treating the chemical exposure. Marcus had a complete first aid kit and some basic veterinary supplies that he kept for treating injured stray animals that sometimes wandered into his garage. He filled a clean bucket with distilled water and gathered clean cloths, antiseptic solution, and burn gel. This might sting a little, Marcus warned, though he had no idea if the creature could understand him. The dragon's eyes tracked his movements with obvious intelligence, and when Marcus began gently cleaning the chemical residue from its scales, it held perfectly still. Only the slight tension in its muscles showed that the process was uncomfortable. As Marcus worked, he found himself talking to the dragon in the same soothing voice he had used with nervous animals in the past. "You're going to be okay. We just need to get this poison off you and treat these burns. You're safe now." The creature seemed to respond to his calm tone, gradually relaxing as the immediate pain of the chemical burns was treated. The process took nearly 2 hours. Marcus carefully cleaned every affected area, applied burn gel to the worst spots, and even managed to fashion a small bandage for a particularly bad burn on the dragon's left front leg. Throughout the entire process, the creature cooperated completely, seeming to understand that Marcus was trying to help. When the medical treatment was finished, Marcus realized that his patient was probably hungry and thirsty. Dragons were supposed to be carnivores, according to the legends, but Marcus had no idea what a real dragon might actually eat. He started with a bowl of clean water, which the dragon drank eagerly. For food, he offered small pieces of the ham sandwich he had brought for lunch. The dragon sniffed the ham carefully, then ate it in delicate bites. Its teeth were sharp but small, designed more for catching fish or small prey than for tearing apart large animals. When the ham was gone, the creature looked at Marcus hopefully, so he offered the rest of his sandwich. The bread was ignored, but the meat and cheese disappeared quickly. With its immediate needs met, the dragon settled down on the pile of rags and seemed to fall asleep. Marcus pulled a clean tarp over it like a blanket and returned to his work on Mrs. Patterson's car. Every few minutes, he found himself glancing over at the sleeping creature, still hardly believing what had happened. As the day wore on, Marcus tried to make sense of the situation. Dragons were supposed to be mythical, but here was clear evidence that they were real. Where had this one come from? Were there others? Why had it appeared now, during the chemical storm? And, most importantly, what was he supposed to do with it? The toxic rain continued until late afternoon. Marcus checked the weather reports and learned that the chemical cloud was finally moving away from the area. Tomorrow would be safe for normal outdoor activities, but the damage to the environment would last much longer. Plants and animals exposed to the rain would suffer effects for weeks or months to come. When the dragon finally woke up, it seemed much stronger. The burns were healing remarkably fast, faster than should have been possible for any normal animal. The creature stood up, stretched like a cat, and looked around the garage with obvious curiosity. It walked over to where Marcus was working and sat down nearby, watching him repair the car engine with apparent fascination. "You like mechanical stuff?" Marcus asked, amused by the dragon's interest. In response, the creature moved closer and actually stuck its head under the car's hood to get a better look at the engine. Its eyes tracked Marcus's movements as he worked, and it made soft chirping sounds that seemed almost like questions. Marcus found himself explaining what he was doing, describing how the engine worked and what each component did. The dragon listened intently, occasionally making sounds that Marcus began to interpret as expressions of understanding or surprise. It was clear that this was no ordinary animal. The intelligence in its eyes was unmistakable, and its curiosity about human technology suggested a sophisticated mind. As evening approached, Marcus faced a difficult decision. He couldn't keep a dragon in his garage indefinitely, but he also couldn't abandon the creature to fend for itself, especially while it was still recovering from its injuries. The chemical contamination would make the outside world dangerous for weeks to come, and a young dragon would be particularly vulnerable. Marcus decided to close the garage early and spend the evening researching dragons online. If they were real, there might be some information available about their care and habits. He also needed to figure out if there were other people who knew about dragons and might be able to help. The dragon seemed content to stay in the garage. When Marcus set up a more comfortable sleeping area with old blankets and a space heater for warmth, the creature investigated everything carefully before settling down. It even seemed to understand when Marcus explained that he would be back in the morning. "I'm going home for the night, but I'll be back first thing tomorrow," Marcus said, gathering his tools and preparing to lock up. "Try to get some rest, and don't get into any trouble while I'm gone." The dragon chirped softly and curled up in its makeshift bed, already looking much healthier than when Marcus had first found it. As Marcus drove home through the empty streets, still damp from the toxic rain, he reflected on the extraordinary day. 24 hours ago, his biggest concern had been fixing Mrs. Patterson's car and avoiding the chemical precipitation. Now he was the caretaker of a mythical creature that shouldn't exist according to everything he had learned about the world. The rational part of his mind suggested that he should contact the authorities, maybe the wildlife department or even the military. But something held him back. The dragon had trusted him completely, showing a level of intelligence and emotional connection that suggested it was more than just an unusual animal. Marcus had the feeling that involving the government might put the creature in danger, turning it into a research subject rather than a living being deserving of protection. That night, Marcus lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and thinking about dragons. He researched everything he could find online, from ancient legends to modern fantasy novels, looking for any clues about real dragon behavior and biology. Most of what he found was obviously fictional, but some of the older texts hinted at the possibility that dragons had once been real creatures that had simply hidden from human contact. By morning, Marcus had made his decision. He would continue caring for the dragon until it was fully healed and strong enough to survive on its own. He would also do everything possible to learn about the creature and help it find its way back to wherever dragons came from. It was a crazy plan, but Marcus had always been the type of person who helped those in need, regardless of how unusual the circumstances might be. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the first clean sky they had seen in days. Marcus arrived at the garage early, bringing fresh food and supplies for his unusual houseguest. When he opened the door, he found the dragon sitting exactly where he had left it, apparently having spent a peaceful night in its temporary home. "Good morning," Marcus said, setting down a bag of groceries that included various meats and fish. "How are you feeling today?" The dragon chirped a greeting and moved closer, its tail wagging slightly like a friendly dog. The burns were healing even faster than Marcus had expected, with new scales already growing to replace the damaged ones. As Marcus prepared breakfast for both of them, he realized that his life had just taken a turn toward the extraordinary. He was no longer just a small-town mechanic fixing cars for his neighbors. He had become the caretaker and protector of a creature that might be the last of its kind, or the first of many. Either way, Marcus knew that his quiet life in New Haven would never be the same again. 3 days had passed since Marcus first discovered the dragon hatchling in the toxic rain. The creature, whom Marcus had started calling Spark because of the way its scales caught the light, had made remarkable progress in recovering from its chemical burns. New scales were growing in where the old ones had been damaged, and the dragon's energy level had returned to what Marcus assumed was normal for a healthy young dragon. During those 3 days, Marcus had learned more about dragons than he ever thought possible. Spark was incredibly intelligent, capable of understanding complex instructions and even showing problem-solving skills that rivaled those of the smartest dogs Marcus had ever known. The dragon was also deeply curious about everything in the garage, from the simplest hand tools to the most complex engine components. What surprised Marcus most was Spark's apparent fascination with mechanical devices. The dragon would sit for hours watching Marcus work on cars, its head tilted in concentration as it observed every movement. When Marcus explained what he was doing, Spark would make soft chirping sounds that seemed to indicate understanding. Sometimes the dragon would even point with its snout toward a particular part or tool, as if asking questions about how things worked. On Wednesday morning, Marcus discovered just how intelligent his houseguest really was. He arrived at the garage to find that Spark had somehow managed to remove several bolts from an old transmission that Marcus had been planning to disassemble for parts. The bolts were neatly arranged in order of size, and the dragon was examining the internal gears with obvious fascination. "How did you manage that?" Marcus asked, impressed despite his concern about the dragon handling potentially dangerous equipment. Spark looked up at him and chirped proudly, then used one claw to point at a wrench lying nearby. The tool was too large for the dragon to grip properly, but somehow Spark had figured out how to use it effectively. Marcus realized that he needed to establish some safety rules if Spark was going to continue exploring the garage. He spent the morning dragon-proofing his workspace, moving dangerous chemicals to higher shelves and securing sharp tools in locked cabinets. At the same time, he set up a special area where Spark could safely examine mechanical parts and simple tools under supervision. The arrangement worked perfectly. Spark seemed to understand the boundaries Marcus had established and stayed within the designated safe areas. In return, Marcus began actively teaching the dragon about mechanical principles, showing how gears work together and explaining the basic concepts of engines and hydraulics. Spark absorbed everything like a sponge, demonstrating an understanding that often surprised Marcus with its sophistication. By Thursday, Marcus had established a routine that accommodated both his regular work and his unusual houseguest. Mornings were devoted to normal auto repair jobs, with Spark observing from a safe distance and occasionally offering what seemed like helpful suggestions through chirps and gestures. Afternoons became informal education sessions, where Marcus taught Spark about different aspects of mechanical engineering while the dragon shared its own unique perspective on how things worked. It was during one of these afternoon sessions that Marcus made a disturbing discovery. While cleaning some old parts in the garage's wash sink, he noticed that the water draining out had an unusual oily sheen to it. When he tested the water with a chemical detection kit left over from his military days, the results showed significant contamination from the toxic rain that had fallen earlier in the week. The contamination wasn't just on the surface. It had soaked deep into the soil around the garage and would likely affect the entire area for months to come. Worse yet, Marcus realized that the contamination might be affecting Spark's health in ways that weren't immediately obvious. Dragons might be more resistant to chemical damage than ordinary animals, but prolonged exposure could still cause serious problems. Marcus spent Thursday evening researching chemical contamination and its long-term effects. What he learned was deeply concerning. The compounds released by the Meridian chemical plant were designed for industrial use and contained several substances that could cause neurological damage, reproductive problems, and immune system suppression in mammals. The effects on a dragon were unknown, but Marcus wasn't willing to take any chances with Spark's health. On Friday morning, Marcus made a difficult decision. He needed to move Spark away from the contaminated area, at least temporarily, until the worst of the chemical residue had been neutralized. The problem was finding a safe place to take a dragon without exposing the creature to unwanted attention from authorities or curious neighbors. Marcus remembered his uncle's old hunting cabin up in the mountains, about 50 miles north of New Haven. Uncle Ray had passed away 2 years ago and left the cabin to Marcus, but it was too remote for regular use and had been sitting empty since the funeral. The isolation that made it impractical as a permanent residence would be perfect for keeping Spark hidden while the dragon recovered from any potential chemical exposure. The cabin was located deep in the national forest, accessible only by a rough dirt road that discouraged casual visitors. It had solar panels for basic electricity, a well for clean water, and enough space for both Marcus and Spark to stay comfortably for several weeks if necessary. Most importantly, it was far from any industrial contamination and surrounded by pristine wilderness. Marcus spent Friday afternoon preparing for the trip. He loaded his truck with supplies for an extended stay, including food for both himself and Spark, basic tools for any repairs the cabin might need, and a complete first aid kit in case of emergencies. He also packed several mechanical puzzles and simple devices that Spark could safely examine and learn from during their stay in the mountains. The biggest challenge was figuring out how to transport a dragon without attracting attention. Marcus solved this problem by building a custom travel crate that looked like an ordinary tool chest from the outside but was actually a comfortable, well-ventilated space sized perfectly for Spark. He lined the interior with soft blankets and added a small battery-powered fan for air circulation. When Marcus explained the plan to Spark, the dragon seemed to understand the necessity of leaving the contaminated garage. Spark examined the travel crate carefully, then climbed inside and settled down comfortably. The dragon even seemed excited about the prospect of adventure, making happy chirping sounds as Marcus secured the crate in the back of his truck. The drive to the mountain cabin took 3 hours over increasingly rough roads. Marcus stopped several times to check on Spark and make sure the dragon was comfortable during the journey. Each time he opened the crate, Spark seemed alert and curious about the changing scenery, pressing its nose against the ventilation holes to smell the clean mountain air. When they finally reached the cabin, Marcus was relieved to see that it was exactly as he remembered. The small log structure sat in a clearing surrounded by tall pine trees, with a spectacular view of the mountains stretching away to the horizon. A small stream ran nearby, providing the sound of running water and access to fresh, clean drinking water that showed no signs of contamination. Marcus spent the rest of Friday afternoon getting the cabin ready for occupancy. He tested the solar power system, checked the well water for purity, and made sure the basic amenities were functioning properly. Meanwhile, Spark explored the area around the cabin with obvious delight, apparently enjoying the freedom to move around in open spaces after being confined to the garage for several days. The dragon was particularly fascinated by the stream, spending long minutes watching the water flow over the rocks and occasionally trying to catch small fish with its claws. Marcus was pleased to see that Spark's natural hunting instincts were intact, suggesting that the dragon would be able to fend for itself when the time came to return to the wild. That evening, as Marcus prepared dinner over the cabin's wood-burning stove, he reflected on how much his life had changed in just 1 week. 7 days ago, he had been a simple auto mechanic with a predictable routine and no major worries beyond paying his bills and keeping his customers happy. Now he was living in a mountain cabin with a dragon, trying to protect a creature that most people believed existed only in fairy tales. Spark seemed to be adapting well to the mountain environment. The dragon had claimed a spot near the fireplace as its sleeping area and spent the evening exploring every corner of the cabin with systematic thoroughness. Marcus was impressed by the creature's methodical approach to learning about its new surroundings, checking each room and examining every interesting object with careful attention. On Saturday morning, Marcus woke to find Spark sitting by the cabin's main window, watching the sunrise paint the mountain peaks in shades of gold and pink. The dragon's scales seemed to catch and reflect the morning light, creating an almost magical effect that took Marcus's breath away. For the first time since finding Spark, Marcus truly understood that he was caring for a creature of extraordinary beauty and intelligence. After breakfast, Marcus decided to explore the area around the cabin more thoroughly. He wanted to make sure there were no hidden dangers that might threaten Spark, and he was also curious to see how the dragon would respond to a completely natural environment. The contaminated urban setting where they had met was hardly ideal for understanding a dragon's true nature and capabilities. The exploration revealed that the cabin was situated in an ideal location for a recovering dragon. The forest provided plenty of shelter and hiding places, the stream offered clean water and natural prey, and the remote location ensured privacy from human interference. Marcus also discovered several caves in the nearby cliffs that would provide perfect nesting sites if Spark decided to stay in the area permanently. Most encouraging of all was Spark's obvious joy in the mountain environment. The dragon ran and played among the trees like a young animal finally given the freedom to express its natural behaviors. Spark climbed rocks with surprising agility, glided short distances using its developing wings, and demonstrated hunting skills that suggested a bright future in the wild. During one of these exploration sessions, Marcus observed something that changed his understanding of dragons completely. While watching Spark investigate a fallen log, Marcus noticed that the dragon's claws were leaving small scorch marks on the wood. When he looked more closely, he realized that Spark was unconsciously generating tiny amounts of heat, possibly as a precursor to the fire-breathing ability that featured in so many dragon legends. The discovery raised new questions about Spark's development and ultimate capabilities. If dragons could indeed breathe fire, when would this ability manifest? How dangerous would it become? And, most importantly, what responsibilities did Marcus have as the dragon's caretaker to ensure that such abilities developed safely? Marcus decided to approach the fire question systematically, observing Spark's behavior for any signs of heat generation or combustion. He also began researching fire safety measures for the cabin, just in case Spark's abilities developed more quickly than expected. The last thing he wanted was to lose the cabin to an accidental fire caused by an inexperienced young dragon. Over the weekend, Marcus noticed several other changes in Spark's behavior and appearance that suggested rapid development. The dragon's wings were growing stronger and more coordinated, allowing for longer gliding sessions between the trees. Spark's appetite had also increased significantly, requiring more frequent hunting trips to supplement the food Marcus provided. Most significantly, Spark was beginning to vocalize in new ways. In addition to the chirps and calls Marcus had become familiar with, the dragon was now producing deeper, more resonant sounds that seemed almost like attempts at language. When Marcus spoke to Spark, the dragon would often respond with complex vocalizations that followed the rhythm and intonation patterns of human speech. On Sunday evening, as Marcus prepared for another week of caring for his unusual houseguest, he realized that Spark was no longer just a helpless creature in need of rescue. The dragon was becoming a true companion, an intelligent being with its own personality, preferences, and capabilities. The relationship between them had evolved from simple caretaker and patient to something approaching friendship. This realization brought both joy and concern. Marcus was delighted to have formed such a strong bond with a creature as remarkable as Spark, but he also worried about the implications of their relationship. Dragons were not domestic animals, and Spark would eventually need to find its own kind and establish an independent life. Marcus's job was to help the dragon develop the skills needed for survival, not to create a permanent dependency on human care. As the sun set behind the mountains and Spark settled down for the night by the fireplace, Marcus made a promise to himself and to the dragon. He would do everything in his power to help Spark grow strong and healthy, to learn about the world and develop its natural abilities. But, when the time came, he would also have the courage to let Spark go, even if it meant losing the most extraordinary friendship he had ever known. The mountain cabin represented a new chapter in both their lives. Here, away from the contamination and chaos of the city, Marcus and Spark could explore the possibilities of their unique relationship while preparing for whatever challenges the future might hold. The dragon was healing, growing, and learning, while Marcus was discovering depths of caring and responsibility he had never known he possessed. As Monday approached, Marcus began planning the next phase of Spark's education and development. The dragon would need to learn advanced hunting skills, develop its physical abilities, and eventually understand its place in the wider world. Marcus was determined to provide the best possible foundation for Spark's future, whatever that future might hold. 2 weeks had passed since Marcus and Spark arrived at the mountain cabin, and the transformation in both the dragon and their relationship had been remarkable. Spark had grown noticeably larger and stronger, with wings that now supported short flights between the trees and scales that had developed a brilliant iridescent sheen. More importantly, the dragon's intelligence continued to evolve in ways that constantly surprised Marcus. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning when Marcus was working on repairing the cabin's solar panel system. One of the panels had been damaged during a recent storm, and Marcus was struggling to reach the broken connections on the roof. As he balanced precariously on his ladder, trying to hold multiple tools while making the repair, he heard a familiar chirping sound from below. Looking down, Marcus saw Spark holding a small wrench in its claws, apparently having retrieved it from the toolbox when Marcus dropped it earlier. But what truly amazed Marcus was that the dragon was now attempting to climb the ladder, moving with careful precision as it carried the tool upward. "Spark, that's incredible!" Marcus called out, steadying the ladder as the dragon climbed. "You're trying to help." When Spark reached the roof level, the dragon carefully handed over the wrench, its eyes bright with obvious pride at having solved the problem of getting the tool to where it was needed. This incident marked the beginning of a new phase in their relationship. Spark was no longer simply observing Marcus's work but actively participating as a helper and problem solver. The dragon seemed to understand the goals of various projects and would often anticipate what tools or materials Marcus needed before being asked. Over the following days, Marcus began deliberately involving Spark in more complex tasks. They worked together to rebuild the cabin's water filtration system, with Spark using its small size and flexibility to access tight spaces that Marcus couldn't reach. The dragon proved to be an invaluable assistant, able to hold components in place, retrieve dropped items, and even make simple adjustments under Marcus's guidance. What impressed Marcus most was Spark's growing understanding of cause and effect in mechanical systems. When they worked on the water pump together, Spark quickly grasped the relationship between the pump's operation and the flow of water to the cabin. The dragon even began pointing out potential problems before they became serious, such as loose fittings or worn components that might fail. During these collaborative work sessions, Marcus noticed that Spark was developing its own communication system. The dragon had moved far beyond simple chirps and calls, now using a complex combination of vocalizations, gestures, and body language to convey specific meanings. Marcus found himself understanding Spark's intentions with increasing accuracy, as if they were developing their own shared language. One evening, while they sat by the fireplace after a particularly successful day of repairs, Marcus attempted something he had been considering for weeks. "Spark," he said slowly and clearly, "can you understand what I'm saying? Really understand it, not just the tone of my voice?" The dragon looked directly at him, tilted its head thoughtfully, and then produced a series of sounds that clearly mimicked the rhythm and intonation of human speech. Encouraged by this response, Marcus began a systematic effort to teach Spark elements of human language. He started with simple words and concepts, pointing to objects and clearly pronouncing their names. To his amazement, Spark began attempting to reproduce the sounds, with varying degrees of success. While the dragon's vocal anatomy was different from that of humans, it proved capable of producing recognizable approximations of many words. Within a week, Spark could clearly say Marcus, water, food, and several other basic words. More importantly, the dragon demonstrated understanding of much more complex concepts, responding appropriately to complete sentences and following detailed instructions. Marcus realized that he was witnessing the development of true interspecies communication, something that scientists had long believed impossible. As Spark's language abilities developed, Marcus learned more about the dragon's origins and experiences. Through a combination of words, gestures, and shared activities, Spark conveyed that it remembered coming from a place high in the mountains, far from any human settlements. There had been others like Spark, but they had been separated during the toxic rainstorm that brought Spark to Marcus's garage. This revelation filled Marcus with both hope and concern. If there were other dragons somewhere in the wilderness, Spark might eventually be reunited with its own kind. But the fact that they had been separated during the chemical storm suggested that the others might also be in danger or need of help. Marcus began planning expeditions into the deeper wilderness to search for any signs of other dragons. Meanwhile, Spark's physical development continued to accelerate. The dragon's flying ability had progressed from short glides to sustained flights of several minutes. Spark could now soar between the mountain peaks with grace and confidence, often disappearing for hours at a time to explore distant areas that Marcus could never reach on foot. During one of these solo flights, Spark made a discovery that changed everything. The dragon returned to the cabin in a state of obvious excitement, chattering in its mixture of dragon sounds and human words while gesturing toward the high mountains. Through patient questioning, Marcus learned that Spark had found something significant in a remote valley about 20 miles away. The next morning, Marcus loaded his backpack with camping supplies and followed Spark on a challenging hike into the high country. The dragon flew ahead, circling back frequently to make sure Marcus was following the correct route through the difficult terrain. After 6 hours of climbing steep trails and navigating rocky passes, they reached the edge of a hidden valley that took Marcus's breath away. The valley was a pristine wilderness sanctuary, completely untouched by human development. A crystal-clear lake reflected the surrounding peaks, fed by waterfalls that cascaded down from the glaciers above. Ancient trees created a cathedral-like atmosphere, and the air itself seemed to sparkle with unusual clarity. But what truly amazed Marcus was what Spark showed him on the far side of the lake. Carved into the cliff face were elaborate cave systems that clearly showed signs of intelligent design. The entrances were perfectly shaped for large flying creatures, with landing platforms and internal chambers that could only have been created by dragons. As they explored the cave system together, Marcus found evidence that this place had been a dragon sanctuary for countless generations. The walls were decorated with intricate carvings that seemed to tell the history of the dragon species, showing scenes of flight, family groups, and interactions with the natural world. Some chambers contained what appeared to be nesting areas, while others seemed designed for communal gatherings or education. Most significantly, Marcus discovered that the caves were not entirely abandoned. Fresh scratches on the walls and recent disturbances in the dust suggested that dragons had been here within the past few months. Spark confirmed this observation, becoming increasingly excited as they explored deeper into the cave system. On their second day in the valley, Marcus and Spark made contact with other dragons. It happened at dawn, as Marcus was preparing breakfast by the shore of the lake. Spark suddenly became alert, looking up at the sky with obvious anticipation. Following the dragon's gaze, Marcus saw three large shapes circling high above the valley. As they descended, Marcus realized he was about to meet adult dragons for the first time. The three dragons were magnificent creatures, each easily 3 times Spark's current size, with fully developed wings and the unmistakable bearing of mature, intelligent beings. They landed on the far side of the clearing, their movements cautious but not threatening. Spark immediately flew over to greet them, engaging in an animated conversation using the complex vocalizations that Marcus was beginning to recognize as true dragon language. After several minutes of discussion, one of the adult dragons approached Marcus. This dragon had scales of deep emerald green and eyes that held ancient wisdom. When it spoke, using carefully pronounced human words, Marcus nearly fell backward in surprise. "You are Marcus," the dragon said in a voice like distant thunder. "Spark has told us of your kindness during the poison rain. We are grateful for your care of our young one." Marcus stammered out a greeting, overwhelmed by the reality of communicating with an adult dragon. The conversation that followed revealed the true scope of the situation he had unknowingly become involved in. The dragons explained that their species had been living in secret for centuries, avoiding contact with humans to prevent persecution and exploitation. The toxic rain that had separated Spark from its family was part of a larger environmental crisis that threatened all wildlife in the region. The dragons had been monitoring human industrial activity for decades, watching with growing concern as pollution and habitat destruction spread throughout their ancient territory. Spark's rescue by Marcus represented something unprecedented in dragon-human relations. Never before had a human shown such selfless care for a dragon, asking nothing in return and expecting no reward. The adult dragons had been watching from a distance throughout Spark's recovery, gradually coming to trust Marcus's intentions. The lead dragon, who introduced herself as Ember, explained that the dragon community was facing a critical decision. Environmental degradation was making their traditional hiding places uninhabitable, while human expansion was eliminating the wild spaces they needed to survive. Some dragons favored complete withdrawal to the most remote wilderness areas, while others believed that limited contact with trustworthy humans might be necessary for their species' survival. Marcus found himself in the extraordinary position of being humanity's first official ambassador to the dragon community. The responsibility was overwhelming, but Marcus understood that he had been given a unique opportunity to help bridge the gap between two intelligent species. The trust that Spark had shown him was now extended to all dragons, making him a crucial link in what could become a new chapter in Earth's history. Over the following days, Marcus learned more about dragon society and culture than any human had ever known. The dragons were revealed to be master engineers and environmentalists, having developed technologies based on natural principles that humans were only beginning to understand. Their caves were not just homes but sophisticated ecosystem management centers, designed to maintain the health of entire watersheds and forest systems. The dragons also possessed knowledge of Earth's history that spanned thousands of years, including insights into climate patterns, geological processes, and biological systems that could revolutionize human understanding of the natural world. They had been the unseen guardians of many wilderness areas, protecting them from both natural disasters and human interference. As the week in the valley progressed, Marcus realized that his relationship with Spark was just the beginning of something much larger. The young dragon was not just recovering from chemical burns but preparing for a role as a bridge between species. Spark's unique experience of human care and friendship, combined with its natural dragon abilities, made it ideally suited to facilitate communication and understanding between the two species. Ember explained that the dragon community wanted to establish a formal relationship with selected humans who could be trusted to keep their existence secret while working toward long-term solutions to environmental problems. Marcus would be the first human to receive this trust, but, if the arrangement proved successful, other carefully chosen individuals might eventually be included. The weight of this responsibility was enormous, but Marcus felt ready to accept it. His military background had taught him to handle sensitive information and complex logistics, while his experience as a mechanic had given him practical skills that the dragons found valuable. Most importantly, his bond with Spark had demonstrated his commitment to protecting and nurturing beings who were different from himself. As their time in the valley drew to a close, Marcus understood that his life would never again be simple or predictable. He was now part of something extraordinary, a secret that would shape the future relationship between humans and dragons. The quiet mechanic who had rescued a small creature from toxic rain had become a key figure in one of the most important developments in Earth's history. The return journey to the cabin gave Marcus time to process everything he had learned and experienced. Spark flew alongside him, occasionally landing to walk beside Marcus on the difficult sections of trail. The dragon's presence was now familiar and comforting, a reminder of the extraordinary friendship that had started this entire adventure. Back at the cabin that evening, as Marcus and Spark sat by the fireplace planning their return to the human world, Marcus realized that their greatest challenges still lay ahead. They would need to find ways to maintain their relationship while keeping the dragon community's secret safe. They would also need to work toward solutions for the environmental problems that threatened both species' survival. But, for the first time since finding Spark in the toxic rain, Marcus felt confident about the future. The bond between them had grown into something strong enough to bridge the gap between species, and the trust of the dragon community provided a foundation for unprecedented cooperation. Whatever challenges awaited them, Marcus and Spark would face them together, as partners in creating a better world for both humans and dragons. 6 months had passed since Marcus first discovered Spark in the toxic rain, and the world looked completely different to both of them. They had returned to New Haven after their transformative experience in the Dragon Valley, but everything about their lives had fundamentally changed. Marcus still operated his auto repair garage, but it now served a dual purpose as a safe house and communication center for the growing cooperation between humans and dragons. The garage had been extensively modified to accommodate this new role. Marcus had installed a sophisticated air filtration system that could neutralize any chemical contamination, ensuring that visiting dragons would be safe from industrial pollution. He had also created hidden living spaces where dragons could rest comfortably while remaining invisible to casual human visitors. Most importantly, he had established secure communication equipment that allowed him to coordinate with the dragon community in their mountain sanctuaries. Spark had grown tremendously during their time together, now nearly the size of a small horse with wings that could carry the dragon for hundreds of miles without rest. The young dragon's intelligence had also developed far beyond what Marcus had initially imagined possible. Spark could now communicate fluently in multiple human languages, understand complex technical concepts, and even assist with sophisticated engineering projects. The partnership between Marcus and Spark had become the foundation for something unprecedented in Earth's history, a formal alliance between human and dragon communities. Working together, they had begun addressing the environmental crisis that threatened both species, developing innovative solutions that combined human technology with dragon wisdom about natural systems. Their first major project involved cleaning up the contamination left by the Meridian chemical plant disaster. Traditional human cleanup methods would have taken decades and cost millions of dollars, but the dragons possessed knowledge of biological processes that could neutralize the toxic compounds much more efficiently. Under Spark's guidance, Marcus had learned to cultivate specialized bacteria that could break down the chemical pollutants, transforming them into harmless organic compounds. The cleanup project became a testing ground for human-dragon cooperation. Teams of humans provided the industrial equipment and logistical support, while dragons contributed their understanding of ecosystem dynamics and their ability to access difficult terrain. The work was completed in just 3 months, restoring the area to full environmental health while demonstrating the potential of interspecies collaboration. Word of the successful cleanup began to spread quietly through carefully selected environmental organizations and government agencies. Marcus found himself meeting with scientists, engineers, and policymakers who had been secretly recruited to support the Dragon Alliance. Each new human participant was carefully vetted by both Marcus and the Dragon community, ensuring that only the most trustworthy individuals learned about the Dragon's existence. Dr. Sarah Chen, a marine biologist who had been studying ocean pollution for decades, became one of the first scientists to work directly with the dragons. When Spark introduced her to Coral, a dragon who specialized in aquatic ecosystems, Dr. Chen later described the experience as the most significant moment of her scientific career. The knowledge that Coral shared about ocean currents and marine biology revolutionized Dr. Chen's understanding of how to address water pollution on a global scale. Similarly, Dr. James Rodriguez, a renewable energy engineer, was amazed by his collaboration with Storm, a dragon whose understanding of atmospheric dynamics led to breakthrough designs for more efficient wind power systems. The dragon's perspective on natural energy flows provided insights that human science had been missing for decades. As the network of human-dragon cooperation expanded, Marcus found his role evolving from simple caretaker to coordinator and translator. His garage became the unofficial headquarters for joint projects, with humans and dragons meeting regularly to share information and plan new initiatives. Spark served as the primary liaison, using its unique understanding of both species to facilitate communication and resolve conflicts. The success of their environmental work attracted attention from unexpected quarters. Government officials who had been briefed on the dragon situation began requesting assistance with other challenges facing human society. The dragons, after careful consideration, agreed to help with certain problems that affected the natural world they all shared. One of the most significant collaborations involved developing new agricultural techniques that could feed growing human populations without destroying natural habitats. Dragon knowledge of soil chemistry and plant biology, combined with human technology and distribution systems, led to farming methods that actually improved environmental conditions while producing more food than traditional techniques. Another breakthrough came in medical research, where dragon understanding of biological processes helped human scientists develop treatments for diseases that had previously been incurable. The dragon's ability to sense changes in living organisms at a cellular level provided insights that revolutionized diagnostic medicine and led to the development of therapies based on natural healing principles. Throughout these developments, Marcus and Spark maintained their close personal relationship while adapting to their new public roles. They spent their evenings at the cabin in the mountains, away from the pressures of coordination and diplomacy, enjoying the simple pleasures of friendship and shared adventure. These quiet times together reminded them both of how their extraordinary partnership had begun with a simple act of kindness during a moment of crisis. Spark had also begun mentoring other young dragons who were interested in learning about human society. The garage became an informal school where dragon hatchlings could safely observe human technology and culture while developing their own understanding of interspecies cooperation. Marcus found himself teaching basic mechanical principles to a classroom of young dragons, each with their own unique personality and interests. One particularly bright young dragon named Flicker showed exceptional aptitude for electronics and computer systems. Under Marcus's guidance, Flicker learned to repair and modify human technology, eventually developing improvements that enhanced the efficiency of the communication systems used by the Human-Dragon Alliance. The young dragon's innovations allowed for real-time coordination between teams working on environmental projects across multiple continents. As the alliance grew stronger, both species began to address larger and more complex challenges. Climate change, which had seemed like an insurmountable problem when approached by humans alone, became manageable when dragon knowledge of atmospheric systems was combined with human industrial capacity. Joint teams developed methods for carbon capture and storage that mimicked natural processes while operating on a scale large enough to make a real difference. The dragons also shared their understanding of sustainable technology, helping humans develop manufacturing processes that produced no waste and consumed minimal energy. These innovations began quietly revolutionizing human industry, creating products that were more durable, efficient, and environmentally friendly than anything previously possible. Perhaps most importantly, the Human-Dragon Alliance began working on education initiatives that would prepare both species for a future of open cooperation. Carefully selected human schools started incorporating environmental education programs based on dragon knowledge, teaching children to understand their connection to natural systems and their responsibility for protecting the planet's health. On the dragon side, young dragons like Spark began learning human languages, technology, and culture as part of their normal education. This new generation of dragons would grow up comfortable with interspecies cooperation, ready to build on the foundation that Marcus and Spark had established. The transformation wasn't without its challenges. Some humans remained skeptical or fearful when they learned about the dragon's existence, requiring careful education and gradual exposure to overcome their prejudices. Similarly, some dragons worried about the risks of revealing themselves to a species with a history of exploiting and destroying the natural world. Marcus found himself serving as a bridge between these competing concerns, using his relationship with Spark as proof that meaningful cooperation was possible. His garage became a neutral meeting ground where representatives from both species could interact safely while working through their differences and building trust. 1 year after their first meeting, Marcus and Spark stood together on the platform outside the mountain cave system where the dragon community maintained its headquarters. They were preparing for a historic ceremony that would formally recognize their partnership as the foundation treaty between humans and dragons. Representatives from both species had gathered to witness the signing of agreements that would guide interspecies cooperation for generations to come. As the ceremony began, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. It had started with a simple decision to help a creature in distress during a toxic rainstorm, but it had led to one of the most significant developments in Earth's history. The alliance between humans and dragons promised to address environmental challenges that neither species could solve alone, while opening possibilities for cooperation that would transform both civilizations. Spark stood beside him, now a fully grown dragon whose wisdom and experience commanded respect from both species. The frightened hatchling that Marcus had rescued had become a leader and teacher, guiding the development of interspecies understanding while maintaining the compassionate spirit that had made their friendship possible. During the ceremony, both Marcus and Spark received formal recognition as founding ambassadors of the Human-Dragon Alliance. But, for both of them, the real reward was much simpler. They had found in each other a friendship that transcended species boundaries, proving that understanding and cooperation could overcome even the most fundamental differences. As the sun set behind the mountain peaks and the ceremony concluded with dragons and humans celebrating together, Marcus knew that their work was just beginning. The alliance they had helped create would face many challenges in the years to come, requiring constant effort and dedication from both species. But, with Spark beside him and the dragon community's trust supporting them, Marcus felt ready for whatever the future might bring. The toxic rain that had brought them together was now just a memory, but its positive consequences would shape the world for generations. Marcus Chen, the small-town mechanic who had chosen to help a creature in need, had become part of something much larger than himself. And Spark, the dragon hatchling who had pleaded for help in the poisonous storm, had found not just rescue but a true partner in building a better world for all Earth's inhabitants. Their story would be told for centuries to come, not as a fairy tale but as historical fact, the beginning of a new age when two intelligent species learned to work together for the benefit of all life on Earth. The mechanic and the dragon had proven that sometimes the most extraordinary changes begin with the simplest acts of kindness, and that friendship can indeed bridge any gap when it is built on trust, respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. In the years that followed, Marcus and Spark continued their work as ambassadors and coordinators, but they also maintained the simple pleasures that had brought them together. They still spent quiet evenings at the mountain cabin, working on mechanical projects and sharing stories of their adventures. They still explored the wilderness together, with Spark flying overhead while Marcus hiked the mountain trails. And they still faced each new challenge as true partners, knowing that whatever difficulties might arise, they would meet them together with the same courage and determination that had turned a chance encounter in toxic rain into one of the greatest friendships in Earth's history.